Deserted Wastelands is one of the newest additions to the Rainworld custom regions, and so far the biggest region to date. But of course, size isn't everything. Some may think that its size is purely to hold the record, but that wasn't the intention. I wanted to make Deserted Wastelands more than just another region, and more so an experience. Today we are going to have a guided tour through my entire region, in which I will talk about the various design choices and aspects, thoughts and ideas that went into this region. Sit back and enjoy. Let's start where the adventure of the player would start, downloading the region in CRS. Here, everyone will set their expectations for the region, the overall orange appearance, the desert-like visuals in the thumbnail, the description, and of course the name of the region all lead to a seemingly obvious conclusion. This region is a desert. Now the player could be either excited or disappointed, depending on if they like deserts or not, but either way this presentation achieves its goal. It seems like it openly presents the entire aesthetic of the region, while hiding the fact that it's a lot more than that. The name of the region is also chosen with the same intention. Deserted Wastelands points not only towards a desert, but also a very empty, vast place with not much life going on, again hiding the actual region's identity. If the expectations are lower, the player is more likely to have them exceeded. The region has just 2 gates. Unlike a lot of other regions where it doesn't matter a lot how you enter it, in Deserted Wastelands it makes a pretty big difference. Therefore the player is not only warned and partially prevented from entering the region from Looks to the Moon, but also instructed not to by a text that appears on the screen. This is of course very different to the general design philosophy of Rainworld and the open world-like character, but there is a reason for it. Because I designed it to be more of an experience than just a region, playing it in the wrong direction would feel strange and not like it was intended. Think of it like playing a story-based game and starting at the end of it, then working yourself all the way towards the beginning. However, this is the only intended way, not the only possible way. The region was designed to be playable in both directions, just with the idea in mind to do it in one way rather than the other. With this in mind, let's head over to 5 Pebbles. The entrance to Deserted Wastelands is just above Pebble's chamber. Most players will get the mark of communication from him and then rise up this room and immediately see the new pipe leading to the right. There's just one room between it and the new gate, so that the top of Pebbles has a symmetrical look on the map. This makes it clear that you now have the choice between going to the wall or the back wall. Now it's time to finally enter the region. Immediately upon entering, a piece of music plays which I have made for this region. The purpose of this track is to differentiate the back wall from the wall. It works like an intro, one that makes sure that the player notices that this is not just a vanilla region. After the track has ended, the player is left alone with the subtle windy ambience and occasional sounds of working machinery. This room branches out the furthest of all backwall rooms, and the player is able to go closer to the edge of this metal beam. You might hear that the wind sound changes when the player comes close to the edge. A much louder howling wind starts to become audible once the player gets closer. Of course this makes sense, as Slughead is now much more exposed to the surrounding wind and not close to a giant metal structure, but actually implementing such things is, in my opinion, a very important part of sound design. I'm going to talk more about sound design later in this video, as I paid a lot of attention to it in Deserted Wastelands. Backwall is visually very close to the wall. We are still on Pebbles after all. The gameplay, however, is quite different. Backwall's rooms feel a lot less packed with objects and have much more sky in the background. While the wall uses a lot of crawl spaces and is often even impossible or really hard to climb without spears, backwall makes more use of poles. My intention was to make the gameplay more diverse than the one on wall is, and also to make it more difficult due to the geometry of the room instead of the amount of enemies. Towards the bottom, the color palette slightly changes into the one of Deserted Wasteland's surface. Because I faded the palette in very small steps, it is hardly noticeable that the color changes at all. Sudden color palette changes in unexpected places usually interrupt the flow of the experience a lot, and I wanted to prevent that as much as I can. After a small tunnel through the inside of Pebbles, we reach the fourth leg of Pebbles Can. At first it is not very noticeable that this room takes inspiration from the leg, but if I change the palette and sound design, it becomes very obvious. As you can see, this leg doesn't seem to support an active part of Pebbles Can, as the green flashes and dark lights are completely missing. At the bottom of this room, we have the first time in this region where you can decide between multiple paths. Only one of them is obvious, the other two are hidden. One is to the right side of the room, and one is further down into a little Easter egg area of the region. Let's go there first. This is Pebbles' fourth leg. The design is very close to the leg in game, however with two big pipes running through it. If the player recognizes it, the sudden very quiet and scary ambience will create an uncanny feeling, which is mixed with familiarity. They might be scared of what could be down here. A bit further down there is a visible amount of corruption on the two pipes. The combination of sounds used here all originate from sounds you hear in Unfortunate Development, thus feeling familiar and fitting for Daddy Long Legs. I used a combination of environmental and spot sounds here to create a rising suspense in this room. The other side of this leg looks much more familiar to the leg we all know already. Here you can find an unlock for a Daddy Long Legs sandbox item, indicating that this is a dead end and it's now time to go back. Of course this leg serves the purpose of environmental storytelling, but I don't want to spoil the lore of the region in this video. Let's go back to this room and use the pipe down here. What follows is a very peaceful and friendly cave section with a lot of food sources. There are a few rooms here connected in a bit of a circle layout, the most bottom room having a shelter. Here's another example of sound design. The room here has almost unnoticeable spot sounds at a few locations. The player won't actively hear this, but it prevents the room's ambience from getting boring. Sound design is always good if the player doesn't notice that it is. In this room it is possible to see another part of the region which is not accessible yet. Using that is a great way of making the player excited for what's going to come, and evokes the need for more exploration. Progressing from this cave section requires the player to get up here. It can be done through a room towards the left. The point of designing it like this is to prevent the player from accidentally finding the right way before being done with the exploration of this part. Once you get up here, you will immediately notice that you are going in the right direction, therefore increasing the excitement and feeling of progression. This simple room has a prominently placed light source at the top. This makes clear that the player is about to see something totally new. The anticipation rises as the poles being climbed, with a wind sound fading in as Slughead reaches the top. Then they are met with the first room of Deserted Wastelands. The first surface rooms have a very dead and barren feeling to them. There are no enemies here, no living plants, nothing. The surrounding structures make it feel like Slughead is visiting a lost place, which I tried to convey through the music piece I made for this part. It is very subtle with a beautiful and hopeful yet sad sounding climax. Then the player is again left behind with nothing but the sounds of the wind. The background is full of environmental storytelling. Here, for example, you can see a cooling rod structure being transported over the surface. These are the things you can find on Pebble's Can. Soon the player will have to decide between going down or continuing to stay on the surface a little longer. We will go down first. Doing this will result in a very sudden change of atmosphere. This screen has been built to look 3D and is supposed to make the player feel that something is not normal about this place. It should be at this point that they realize this is not just a desert. We enter the underground structure and are met with rooms full of pipes, enemies and hollow backgrounds. Down here I put another music trigger which plays Dust Cloud, an unused song from the game files. I think it fits very well down here. I think it's important that most rooms have at least 2 or more ways to traverse them. I try to pay a lot of attention to that throughout the region. It allows the player to make decisions as well as observe the environment to avoid enemy encounters. Let's get a little bit more into sound design. I'm not a professional, but I believe that there are 2 kinds of sound design options. The first are the sounds the player expects to hear. For example, when you're on a tall structure, you would expect it to be windy, or if you step closer to working machinery, you expect it to make a sound. The second kind are the almost inaudible sounds which create a feeling. They don't necessarily have to make sense, but rather create or amplify a feeling that is already being conveyed. For example, this long room down here has a very subtle subterranean ambience in the middle of it. There's no reason for the sound to be here except to make the section more scary. It is barely noticeable, so you have to pay a lot of attention. Another example are these small rooms. I use deep weird wind in the middle of these to make the player feel more exposed and in danger when standing in front of the open void. For some more variety, the big 6-screen rooms have a very silent wall hum sound in the background, which differentiates them from the small screens in between. All these little details combined make the sound diverse while still feeling natural. Now that we are done with this underground part, before continuing, let's discuss the other direction at this split point. Going further right will lead the player through another surface room before they see a little cave-like section. This might be the player's first encounter with the custom threat music. Unlike the threat music from the vanilla game, Deserted Wastelands threat is much more aggressive and much louder. When there is just an enemy in the room, you hear a very subtle kick which is supposed to simply indicate the presence of a predator. Then, as an enemy might approach you, most other threat music will play an ARP sound or percussions or anything like that. But in my region, the next layer is another much louder kick, which intensifies the fear of the player and is meant to feel more like a heartbeat. Combined with that, the player might hear one of these two extra layers. Then, as the threat intensifies, this layer usually kicks in. At a much higher threat, there is a layer with the same melody but with a much lower filter cutoff. The simple and repetitive melody of the music makes it very memorable and easy to listen to. A lot of players reportedly have this melody stuck in their head hours after playing it. Time to go back down into this part. The background of this room is actually a representation of the section the player has just been in. A lot of players will not notice this, but I thought it would be a cool thing to implement. Now we enter the next major section of the region. This cluster of rooms starts with W, due to the location of these rooms on the side of the wall of the main structure of the region. That's also why the third layer is for the most part completely covered. Anyway, these W rooms do something quite different compared to what the region started with. After surviving the almost hellish platforming that the previous section had to offer, I wanted to give the player a more relaxing area, with many more paths to choose. Slughead can shelter here in the middle of this little tower, and then explore the surrounding area. The lower rooms are mostly taken over by yellow lizards. They crawl through the mix of interior and exterior rooms and can be a huge threat to Slughead, but they always try to give the player enough hiding opportunities and alternative ways. Climbing the little tower at the top triggers a piece of music. It's Lone Sound, a track also used in the vanilla game. I thought it fits well here and gives this part a bit more of a relaxed vibe. It encourages the player to explore more of this room cluster and gives them a break from the very loud threat music. This is probably the most euphoric part of the region, with the most positive mood. In Deserted Wastelands you constantly feel like you are really far away from the rest of the Rainworld ecosystem, as if you are in another world. And here I wanted to make this foragent place feel at least a bit more like another home. Eventually you will reach this room, marking the end of the W room cluster. This has been referred to by many as the stair room, and is one of the most detailed rooms in the entire region. You can see stairs with handrails that are carefully created out of props, as well as the little chamber leading up to it. One screen further up you can see two metal beams in the foreground and power cables hanging further back. I will explain the architecture of this in just a second. There are 5 rooms here which together are supposed to resemble an elevator. I've put the rooms into a single image to help visualize it. Down here in the stair room, this is supposed to be the elevator control chamber. Maintenance could be done down here, or perhaps the elevator was controlled in this room. This small one-screen room has the actual platform of the elevator, with the mine train style carriages from the room next to it being able to roll on it or off from it. Above this is a continuation of the elevator shaft to the surface, where the carriages can again roll in or out of the elevator. There are also conveyor belts to fill them up with different materials. I think environmental storytelling like this is quite important in region design. It shows that the creator put some thought into their region and makes it more interesting to play. Structures don't have to be immediately recognizable. In fact, it sometimes gives quite a mysterious feeling if they aren't, but it is still good if the effort is visible. Remember the more euphoric mood I was trying to achieve in the W room cluster? This is where I wanted to give that mood a complete 180 with another music trigger. This song is called Proxima. Endless, barren wastelands. Slughead goes east, further and further away from the rest of the world. The euphoric mood from a few minutes ago is now shattered by the harsh reality. Slughead is alone and lost in a seemingly never-ending land. The only option being to continue. We are in the second half of the main structure's surface. Unlike the bottom half that served as an introduction to the region's environment, this surface has 2 different layers and is quite interconnected. There are 3 structures in this general area, which I can't really talk about due to spoilers. When I first built the 2 surfaces, they had no connections between each other, which made them extremely linear. This changed a lot in the final version. As Slughead goes further east, we are reaching what I'd consider the halfway point of the region. The colors slowly change and the environmental sounds fade out, indicating that the player is about to reach a very special area. The Edge introduces itself with a really loud sound effect I made. It only plays once when you enter the subregion for the first time. The design of the Edge is a clear indicator that you reach the most eastern part possible. The wind here is strong and the grey colors make everything seem very dry and dead. It has an endgame kind of feeling, even though it's only the halfway point of the region. I wanted to make clear that the player is now leaving deserted wastelands and is about to enter a new unfamiliar land. The gameplay of this part is quite different to the one of Backwall. It is far less forgiving and quite a bit more difficult to climb up, which is fortunately not the intended way, but still possible. I also gave it a bit of a cruel aspect. The edge is sloped inwards, so that it is very easy to fall down all the way if you miss the platform. While the descent can be done in a few seconds, the ascent usually takes up to a decently long cycle. At the bottom, Slughead is met by this very open and flat room. I added yet again a music trigger here to play the unused song Upper Wall. It is very quiet, but adds a bit more of mystery to this place. It's getting darker as the player descends even further underground and traverses the subway-style rooms of the edge. It combines the trains of Subterranean with the darkness and creatures of Shaded Citadel to create a very scary and claustrophobic feeling. All the rooms here look very similar, which is intentional. The repetition makes the player feel more lost. I used Subterranean wind and ambience on lower pitch to further add to the claustrophobia of these rooms, only to be added by the endless and mysterious pit at the bottom. To make this section a little more scary, I put something else down here. A red centipede. It is the only hunter exclusive creature in this region which you can find on all difficulties. While I'm generally against doing this, I really wanted to make this part more terrifying. It especially intensifies it on the second playthrough, as you will know that there is a red centipede, but you don't know where it is. So the player carefully traverses the darkness, only hoping to not stumble upon the scary predator. If you survived the edge, you are greeted by this very bright and beautiful light beam from the ceiling. We are now getting to the finale of the region. A broken gate clearly shows that we are making progress. It is also corrupted heavily, telling the story that it might have been destroyed by Daddy Longlegs. Welcome to Hydration System. This clearly quite modern facility is the most unique part of the region. Immediately when entering, you hear a track composed by me called Black Lizard. The melody of this is actually the same as the one of White Lizard, a track you hear when entering the lag for the first time. It is the loudest track of the region and has quite a bit more of an epic and dramatic feeling to it, showing that this is the final section. The room design of Hydration System is overall quite similar to the rest of the region, with many paths in every room and a lot of possibilities to avoid predators. But it adds ceiling slides as a feature and uses air vents in some rooms, both being inspired by Etheridge's sub-region heat ducts, just a lot easier. Hydration System is also the only deserted Wastelands sub-region which contains water and a small swimming section. I used a very deep sound to convey the feeling of being under high water pressure and to make the player feel more stressed and immersed. The room design changes yet again to a more brown theme. The architecture here has a bit more of an older and rusty vibe than the upper part. There are only a few rooms with this style, however. If you chose to go down and right, you will end up in these rooms. They are a collection of one-screen square rooms, each with a different machine in their center and lizards in the room's color. A small swimming section later, you will find two very interesting rooms. They are explained in the lore, but I won't spoil that. Instead, I will let the environmental storytelling speak for itself. Now you did it. You conquered the challenges of deserted wastelands and made it through all the sub-regions. But I don't want to enter a region with just a simple gate. So I made this long descending pipe downwards, leading into a tunnel with red lights. The player is supposed to feel like Slughead is now very deep underground, buried by the rest of the world. They may realize that they are approaching the end, and all the memories of their adventure will run through them, realizing what Slughead has gone through. I wanted to make the finale dark and lonely, making the player feel like they are forgotten, similar to the depths of Rainworld's actual finale, just not quite to the same extent. Even further down, the player will go through a shoreline-style room. The heartbeat increases the tension and makes clear this is the end. And here we are, at the gate to looks to the moon. Now, maybe you understand why I said that Deserted Wastelands is more than just a region. The familiarity of Backwall with the gentle transition, the caves with many food sources preparing the player for their adventure, the first introduction into the atmosphere of the region, the mysterious and frustrating underground section, the openness and relief, the realization of reality, anticipation, fear, curiosity, and loneliness. Everything was made to be an adventure through a massive region that does many things in unconventional ways, but tries to create an all-new Rainworld experience. I hope you enjoyed the video and of course the region itself. Maybe you learned a few things you didn't know yet, or learned a few techniques to make your own region more interesting. Thanks for watching.